In this day and age, it's hard to create a, quote, perfect game in a medium where perfection is so subjective, and within a franchise that has such a huge legacy, it was never going to be perfect, but it wouldn't stop 343 Industries from taking a modernised approach to a 20-year-old franchise that both pushes it in a new direction whilst respecting and honouring the source material. In this review, we will be delving deep into Halo Infinite, a game 6 years in the making, and whilst we won't discuss any heavy spoilers in this video, we will touch on the story without discussing key plot points, the world of Zeta Halo, the mysterious underworld it has to offer, visuals, and its gameplay. So lads and lasses, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zeta Halo. Hey up lads and lasses, Fletch here from Ultimate Halo, and if you're not already, please do consider subscribing. This is my full-time job, so you hitting that button down below helps me out tremendously. And further to this, I do want to say that Halo Infinite, without a doubt, and I'm going to set the record off very strongly here, is 343 Industries' best Halo game to date on so many fronts. And trust me, I do love this game, but it's definitely not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, so let's go delve into a little bit further detail. So at this stage, I would like to talk about the story of Halo Infinite. Now, I'm under certain restrictions of what elements I can discuss, so please bear with me as I try my best to sidestep them and not spoil it for you guys. So first of all, I want to say right away that the dynamic between the Master Chief and the weapon, Chief's new Cortana model, is incredible. What I feel is so satisfying about this is seeing that Chief is an experienced soldier, which we've seen every step of the way for the past 20 years. But on the other hand, the juxtaposition is the weapon is absolutely new to everything. She's been provided very little context as to what the grander picture is, what's been going on, and seeing Chief filling the narrative holes and viewing his reaction to things that we already know is almost validating because we feel the same way on a lot of the things that they discuss. But not only is this a great tool for existing players, but it allows new players to understand some of more what's going on without any forced exposition. The pilot is also a great addition to the plot because some of the moments he has with Chief are without a doubt some of my favourite in the entirety of the franchise, which range from being sad and downtrodden to utter joy. The pilot makes you realise that the Chief isn't your standard human. You see the pilot's frustrations clash with Chief on many occasions, and this makes you remember how rigid the Chief can be. But when Chief does have these important moments when he opens up that door to the pilot, it makes it that more impactful. Then, in contrast to all of this, the weapon, as we've seen with Cortana in the past, is very human. She is imperfect. She also has different frustrations with the Master Chief because he struggles to let her in, gain his trust, and forms some of the most compelling interactions in the plot. Now let's talk about the enemies you'll be fighting against, because the community has been talking a lot about Atriox. He's a great character that was introduced in Halo Wars 2, but whilst he does have some involvement to a degree in the game, you do come to realise that it's Escharum, which is the one you really need to worry about. He is a battle-hardened veteran of the Banished, but he's lost meaning since he defeated humanity on Zeta Halo, and in his own words, he became lost and alone. However, the Chief returning invigorated him, so you can tell he's excited for this challenge, and when exploring the ring you are taunted by him and faced with his best warriors along the way. Now speaking of which, Halo Infinite has some incredible boss battles, and we'll leave the gameplay for later, but what I will say is that most of them are great adversaries. Then by no means main characters or painted to be that way, but they all build up to their own respective battles very well and do a great job of portraying the Banished and their lethal force. But there seems to be one character we're yet to talk about, someone that we know very little about building up to the launch of the game, and this is the Harbinger. Whilst I can't reveal her role in the story, what I will say was I was left scratching my head by her presence. Now the Harbinger was well written from a perspective of her characterization, but I feel at the same time she only exists for the sole purpose of something grander, which you will find more about when you play the game. And whilst this was my main issue with the narrative, what I will say is that 343 are building up to something pretty Wild is the only way I can truly express it, because the ending implications are massive, they are huge, ginormous, and 343 really dug deep into the fact that Zeta Halo is so mysterious and full of story, but it might not necessarily go where you expect it to. But at the same time, it's setting new plot lines that are quite frankly some of the most exciting we've had in so long, and I cannot wait to see how this story progresses in the future. Oh yes, and Steve Downes and Jen Taylor produced some of their most fantastic performances once again, as well as the rest of the cast. There was great direction mixed with some stellar talent that really brings these characters to life, and dare I say that they are probably some of the best performances within the whole franchise. You notice throughout there's such a deep understanding of these characters, and Chief in particular at times implies a lot through his voice, without necessarily having to articulate himself fully. You can feel his emotions through how he's saying things and not what he's saying specifically. The pilot was also excellent. There's two scenes where I exactly mirrored how he felt, and it actually got me invested in him as a character, and it made me express some strong emotions along the way. Escharum, on the other hand, well, we all knew that he was going to be a great performance from last year's gameplay trailer, and let's just say he does not disappoint in the final product either. Overall, I think the story is fantastic. Whilst I wouldn't say it's the strongest, it's clear that 343's intent is to satisfy new fans as well as hardcore lore fanatics, which was never going to be easy, but they did a great job of balancing this with their direction, and without a doubt, what's next is going to be huge. Okay, so I feel like I've sidestepped as much as I can around the key plot points for Halo Infinite the best I can, and honestly I don't think I've necessarily done it justice, but nevertheless, we're going to talk about the main character in Halo Infinite, which is Zeta Halo. And I call it a character because it's full of life, and in my previous videos I compared this game to The Legend of Zelda: The Breath of the Wild, and I would exactly describe that game as a key influence. You see, around every corner you turn there's something to do, an outpost to rescue, a bunch of Marines in need of help, an Easter egg on the top of a mountain, or a dark, damp cave with secrets to uncover. And I've loved every minute I've spent on this ring. It's an incredibly liberating feeling just to be able to go off the beaten path and forge my own story. What I will say is one of the key concerns that fans had about the ring, which I've personally shared, is that there's very little variety in terms of biomes in respect to, let's say, snow and desert areas. And by no means misread my words, I do sorely miss that variety in a Halo game, but at the same time, I don't think it detracted from exploring the ring. There's a lot of variety in terms of the scarred lands you explore, the dark caves, the Forerunner buildings, bright and beautiful mountain tops, and expansive grasslands, and I also think the night and day system really does lend to this even more. But one thing I will note is the beauty of Zeta Halo. Now, perching yourself on top of a mountain is a beautiful sight in itself, but when you are watching the day turn into night, this is when the game truly becomes something special. This, along with the dynamic score that sets in, it makes you feel right at home, whilst I've already put in an absurd amount of hours into this game. Without also giving away any locations, I can also confirm that skulls are back, which you can collect, along with various other collectibles such as dolls like the ones found in Halo 2 Anniversary, but you will see much more of these things come on this channel soon enough. Then lastly, on the surface of Zeta Halo, the banished fortresses that occupy the ring. Now, a lot of people were worried that it might feel like a Far Cry clone, but with a Halo skin, and I'm delighted to say this feels nothing like it. It's simply an expansion of what made Halo combat evolved so great. It feels great to actually approach these from any angle you want, and the gameplay, to be quite honest with you, is so much better than Far Cry on so many levels. But it's also about what happens underneath the ring's surface, and I've made this explicitly clear in my preview videos that the Forerunner structures are hands down, no question, the best looking in the franchise. The way the light reflects off the structures, how you're bathed in deep blue and gold lights, and the atmospheres that are created are spectacular. So whilst Zeta Halo certainly isn't perfect, and by no means the 27 trailer didn't give us the biomes we expected, what we got was a great place to explore and the perfect hub world for Halo Infinite's story. Now onto the visuals before we wrap things up with the gameplay and the final rating. Now, to keep this part brief, Halo Infinite is stunning. To some, there might be some comparisons to Halo 5, which I think a lot of people had issues with the art style, but it was still technically a stunning game. Halo Infinite takes a step back and pays more respect to the original source material of the franchise, but we've already discussed why the Forerunner caverns are incredible, the banished interiors and environments are perfect, and they encapsulate the banished aesthetic personally, and the world of Zeta Halo Halo is stunning. Now, some of you might think, well, Zeta Halo isn't probably the most stunning open world, and I would agree with that when comparing to games such as Red Dead Redemption, which are very different in terms of what you can achieve in terms of gameplay. It doesn't look as good, but for the amount of time it takes to travel, let's say in a Banshee, you are traveling through this environment a lot quickly. There's a lot more physics and there's a lot more different combat scenarios going on at the same time, so it's not going to be the most stellar open world on the planet. However, despite my personal love for the visuals, which I will reiterate, I think this is a beautiful Halo game, probably one of the most beautiful we've had. There are some visual issues I really do have some serious gripes with. Firstly, the frame rate for facial animations. I didn't think it personally spoilt my experience, but this game would benefit so much more from having them at 60 frames, as they're currently running at what looks to be 30 frames per second. Now initially I did think this might be a console only thing, but I've since played it on the PC version on Steam, and the same issue exists, which is a huge shame. Hope this is something 343 can address in the future, and also I have the same experience with some first person animations. Now you can actually see it on the skewer in multiplayer for example, but sometimes at random points in the game you will notice, more so on console, that even actions like clambering drop you to a frame rate of about 30 frames per second, and it just makes the game look a little bit choppy at times. Speaking of clambering, I love the gameplay in Halo Infinite. It's truly entertaining to face the Banished. There's so much variety in terms of how they play, whether they are aggressive berserkers, how much faster the grunts now are, and just how agile and fun to play against the elites are. And due to Infinite taking much more of a focused sandbox, the weapons are all great fun to use, and you're always encouraged to swap out due to ammo limitations, and I never found myself short of weapons at my disposal. The equipment, which we've also all experienced on the multiplayer side of things, is excellent. Each piece is fun to use, but one major issue I do have with them is something I feel will be exclusive to controller players mostly. In the game you have to use the thruster, the grapple shot, drop wall and threat sensor, and this means that switching between them can be a test of patience, especially when you're in a challenging boss battle. So what you have to do to actually change your equipment is by pressing right on the D-pad, and then you have to pretty much remember which button then correlates to which equipment piece. For example, if I want to select another piece, I'm going to have to press up on the D-pad and then left on the D-pad to actually finalize my selection. It's a little bit clunky and it makes the bosses even more challenging than they need to be, and if it was easier to remember, I would have used a lot more variety of equipment on my first playthrough, but sadly I just stuck with a grapple shot because that was easy and the best piece of equipment to use. Oh yes, and the bosses, they're incredible, and there's a great variety to how they play. They force you to use the sandbox around you to take them down, and I can say with absolute certainty that Halo Infinite's bosses are hands down the best we've ever seen in this franchise. Alright, so here we are. It's time to give Halo Infinite a number, a rating from 1 to 10, and this has been hard for me because I love this game so dearly, and I'm not going to stop having fun for a long time now. However, there are some fundamental parts missing from this game that I think are going to hinder my ability to give it a near perfect score. First of all, it's a mission select option. Unfortunately, you cannot replay missions in a traditional way like every other Halo game. You have to fully replay the game, which as a content creator is really annoying, but as a fan it's just as much so. As I'm sure you're also all aware, at this very moment there's no campaign co-op, which is coming in about 6 months time, which is a huge shame because when I was exploring Zeta Halo, it was always in the back of my mind that this experience would be significantly enhanced by playing with my friends. So whilst I think this rating might actually be a little harsh because I think the quality of the campaign itself is spectacular, for me I think that 8.5 out of 10 is a fair rating. If co-op campaign was there at launch, I'd be more inclined to give it a 9 out of 10, and if mission select was there, I'd be quite close to maybe pushing towards a 9.5 out of 10. But I want you guys to let me know in the comment section down below. I love this game. I cannot wait for you all to play it. So I want to know your thoughts. Make sure you subscribe to Ultimate Halo for more Halo Infinite content to come over these coming weeks. And I will see you next time on the one and the only Ultimate Halo.
Subscribe now to Ultimate Halo for more unfriggin' believable Halo content.